The announcement came not as a whisper, but as a command that cleaved through laughter like a blade through silk, and in the sudden silence that followed, Rosalind Varden understood that her life had just been rewritten by a voice she had never heard speak her name before. She stood in chains before the Vampire King's throne, mud still clinging to her threadbare dress, her dark hair tangled and unwashed, surrounded by a court of immortals whose alabaster skin seemed to glow in the candlelight of the underground throne room. They had been laughing at her, laughing at the human girl dragged before their king for the crime of stealing blood rations from a supply truck, laughing at her defiance when she refused to beg, laughing at the very audacity of her existence in their pristine marble halls. The sound had echoed off vaulted ceilings decorated with frescoes depicting vampire victories over humanity, a cacophony of cruel amusement that made her jaw clench and her eyes burn with unshed tears of rage. Then the king had spoken. Silence. That single word, and the laughter died. This woman will be my queen. The court had frozen. Rosalind had frozen. Even the guards holding her chains had gone still as statues. Now, in the ringing quiet, she dared to lift her eyes fully to the dais where Percival Ravencroft sat upon his throne of black stone and silver filigree. She had glimpsed him before, of course. Everyone in New Amsterdam knew the Vampire King by sight, even those who lived in the human quarters and tried to avoid the immortal elite. He appeared in broadcasts, in photographs plastered across government buildings, in the nightmares of those who remembered the war 30 years ago when his kind had emerged from the shadows and taken control of the eastern seaboard. But she had never seen him like this. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. His skin was the color of fresh snow, luminous in the warm light. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves of pure white that seemed to shimmer with each slight movement of his head. His features were sharp and aristocratic, all elegant planes and precise angles, as if sculpted by an artist who understood beauty on a fundamental level that humans could only approximate. He wore black velvet and silver, rings on his long fingers, and a circlet of dark metal across his brow. Everything about him spoke of power, of centuries lived, of authority unchallenged. Everything except his eyes. Those were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch, and in their depths, the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes, she saw something she could not name. Not hunger, though there was that too. Not desire, though perhaps that as well. Something colder and hotter at once. Something that looked almost like fury, but not at her, at his court. "Your Majesty," one of the courtiers finally stammered, a woman with white hair coiled atop her head like a crown of serpents, her gown a waterfall of crimson silk. "Surely you jest. This creature is an outcast, a thief. She has no name, no family, nothing to recommend her." "I do not jest, Lady Seraphine." The king's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the silk. "I have made my declaration before this court. Rosalind Varden will be my queen." He knew her name. How did he know her name? Rosalind felt the ground shift beneath her feet, though she had not moved. The chains around her wrists suddenly felt less like restraints and more like props in a play she had not auditioned for. "This is unprecedented," another voice called out, male this time, coming from a vampire in midnight blue who stood near the base of the dais. "No human has ever been elevated to, 'Then I am setting a precedent.'" Percival rose from his throne in one fluid motion, and the court collectively took a step back. He was tall, she realized, taller than she had thought. When he moved down the steps toward her, each footfall was silent, despite his boots, and the very air seemed to part for him. "Unless someone wishes to challenge my authority to choose my own queen." No one spoke. No one moved. The threat hung in the air like smoke. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell him something like winter and old books and night air. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. She refused to lower her eyes. If this was some elaborate humiliation, some new torture designed to break her spirit before they executed her, she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cower. "Remove her chains," he said quietly. The guards hesitated. The king turned his head just slightly, not even looking at them, and they scrambled to obey. The metal fell away from her wrists, leaving red marks on her skin. She resisted the urge to rub them. "You will be given quarters in the eastern wing," Percival continued, still watching her face. "You will be attended by servants, clothed appropriately, fed. Whatever you require will be provided. In 3 months' time, when the consort trials are complete, we will be wed according to the old laws." "No," Rosalind heard herself say. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the assembled vampires. Several hissed. The king's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or was it satisfaction? "No," he repeated, his voice soft. "I don't understand why you're doing this." Her own voice sounded steadier than she felt, which was a small miracle. Her heart was hammering so hard she was certain every vampire in the room could hear it. "I don't understand what game this is, but I won't be used as a weapon against your court, a punishment for their mockery, a lesson in humility that you can revoke whenever it suits you. If you're going to execute me, do it. If you're going to imprison me, do it. But don't pretend to honor me when you mean to shame them." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, incredibly, one corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, something more complicated. "You think I am being cruel," he said. "I think you're being strategic. And if I am, then I want no part of it." She squared her shoulders, despite the fact that she was filthy and exhausted and surrounded by creatures who could kill her without effort. "Find another prop for your power games, Your Majesty." The silence that followed was different from the one before. This one crackled with tension. Lady Seraphine looked as if she might faint. The vampire in midnight blue had gone rigid with either anticipation or horror. Percival's eyes never left hers. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the vast throne room. "The human Rosalind Varden has questioned the sincerity of my intentions. This is her right as one chosen for the throne. I declare before this court that my offer is genuine. She will undergo the consort trials. If she survives and succeeds, she will be queen with all the rights and privileges that entails. If she refuses, she will be granted safe passage to any territory beyond my kingdom, with coin enough to start anew, and no charges will stand against her." He paused. "But I do not revoke my choice. I do not jest and I do not lie. 3 months, Rosalind Varden. Give me 3 months to prove I mean what I say." She searched his face for any sign of deception. His features remained impassive, but his eyes were steady on hers, and in them she thought she saw something that might have been sincerity, or desperation, or both. It made no sense. None of this made sense. But the alternative was to refuse, to take his offer of safe passage and leave this city where she had been starving and struggling for years, where she had no one and nothing, where every day was a battle to survive. Leave and go where? To another city controlled by vampires? To the wastelands between territories where humans lived in squalor? She had nothing to lose by accepting. 3 months. 3 months of being fed and housed and clothed. And at the end, if this was all some terrible joke, she would at least be strong enough to run. "Fine," she said. 3 months. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, she thought. He bowed his head to her, just slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that seemed to cost him nothing, and yet somehow felt monumental. "Then it is settled." He turned to face his court. "Rosalind Varden is under my protection. Any who harm her answer to me. Any who insult her insult the crown. Make your preparations. The trials begin at the next full moon." He gestured to a pair of female vampires who stood near a side entrance, both dressed in elegant gray gowns. "See that she is cared for, everything she needs." The 2 women bowed and approached cautiously, as if Rosalind might bite. She almost laughed at the absurdity, as if she were the dangerous one here. The king returned to his throne without another word to her, his white hair sweeping behind him like a cape. The audience was clearly over. The court began to disperse in hushed murmurs, casting glances at her that ranged from curiosity to contempt to something that might have been fear. Fear of what she represented, perhaps. A crack in the social order, a human elevated above them. Rosalind followed the two vampire women out of the throne room, her legs shaking with delayed shock, her mind spinning. Behind her, she heard the king give quiet orders to someone about security and preparations. His voice was calm, controlled, utterly assured. She wondered if he had any idea what he had just done. If he understood that he had taken a girl who had nothing and given her a reason to hope. A dangerous thing, hope. It could make you reckless. It could make you brave. It could make you willing to face impossible odds just to see if the world might, for once, surprise you with kindness instead of cruelty. Or it could destroy you when it was ripped away. The chambers they brought her to were beyond anything she had ever imagined, let alone experienced. The rooms were vast and high-ceilinged, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with furniture that looked antique and priceless. There was a bedroom with a canopied bed large enough for 4 people, a sitting room with velvet sofas and a fireplace, a bathroom with a marble tub that could have been a small pool, windows stretched from floor to ceiling, covered in heavy drapes that the vampires immediately drew shut. Sunlight, one of them explained unnecessarily. We cannot enter during the day if the windows are uncovered, but you may open them when you are alone if you wish. Thank you, Rosalind said, because she did not know what else to say. The 2 vampires introduced themselves as attendants assigned to her care. The taller one was named Isadora, the shorter one Millicent. Both were polite but distant, treating her with careful courtesy that felt more like handling a volatile substance than genuine warmth. They showed her the wardrobe, already filled with dresses and gowns in her size. How had they known her size? And explained that meals would be brought to her 3 times a day unless she wished to dine in the great hall. The king has requested that you be left to rest tonight, Isadora said. Tomorrow your preparation for the trials will begin. Tutors will come to teach you our history, our laws, our customs. You will be trained in etiquette, in politics, in the expectations of a consort. What are the trials? Rosalind asked. The 2 vampires exchanged glances. Millicent spoke carefully. They are ancient tests, designed to determine if a consort is worthy of standing beside the throne. They have not been invoked in centuries. The specifics are decided by the Council of Elders, not the king. They will be announced when the time comes. Will they try to kill me? Another exchanged glance. They are not meant to be easy, Isadora said finally. But the king has declared you under his protection. They cannot outright murder you without consequence. It was not the reassurance Rosalind had hoped for, but it was something. After the attendants left, she stood alone in the center of the opulent sitting room and tried to process what had happened. Hours ago, she had been dragging herself through alleys, hungry and desperate enough to steal from a vampire supply truck, knowing she would likely be caught. She had expected execution. She had made her peace with it. And now she was here, in rooms that could house a dozen families from the human quarter, being told she might become queen. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was the first interesting thing that had happened to her since her parents had died in the plague 5 years ago and left her alone in a world that had no use for orphaned human girls. She walked to the bathroom and stared at herself in the enormous mirror above the marble sink. She looked like a wraith. Hollow-eyed, gaunt-cheeked, her dark hair a tangled mess, her dress little more than rags. No wonder the court had laughed. She looked like someone's idea of a cruel joke. But the king had not laughed. She thought of the way he had looked at his courtiers, the contempt in his voice when he silenced their mockery. She thought of the way he had descended the dais to stand before her, the way he had met her defiance with something that was not anger, the way he had offered her an escape even as he asked her to stay. Either he was the best liar she had ever encountered, or he had meant at least some of what he said. She supposed she had 3 months to find out which. The bath water was hot and scented with oils that smelled of lavender and vanilla. Rosalind sank into it and let herself feel, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the simple animal pleasure of being warm and clean. She scrubbed her skin until it turned pink, washed her hair 3 times until the water ran clear, and only then allowed herself to lean back and close her eyes. Somewhere above her, in the palace that stretched beneath the city like a hidden world, the vampire king was probably dealing with the aftermath of his announcement. She wondered what his court was saying to him now that she was gone. She wondered if he regretted it yet. She wondered why she cared. The next morning, she woke in the enormous bed to find that someone had brought breakfast while she slept. Fresh bread, butter, jam, sliced fruit, cheese, and a pot of tea that was still steaming. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, unable to quite believe that this was real. That she was allowed to eat until she was full, that no one would take it away. After breakfast, the tutors began to arrive. First came an elderly vampire named Cornelius, who spoke in a dry, precise voice about the history of the vampire courts, the bloodlines and territories and wars that had shaped the current kingdom. Then came a stern woman named Vivian, who drilled her on etiquette and forms of address, on how to move through a room, how to hold a wine glass, how to incline her head to show respect without showing submission. Then came a younger male vampire named Lucian, who taught her the basics of vampire politics, the factions within the court, the alliances and rivalries she would need to navigate. It was exhausting. Her head spun with names and rules and expectations, but she absorbed it all, determined not to fail through ignorance. If she was going to do this, if she was going to face these trials and possibly become queen, she would do it properly. Percival did not visit her that first day, or the second, or the third. She told herself she did not mind. Told herself she was too busy learning to wonder where he was or what he was doing. But the truth was that his absence felt deliberate, and she could not decide if it was meant to give her space or to make a point. By the fourth day, she was starting to feel like a bird in a gilded cage, pampered and prepared but isolated from the court she was supposedly meant to join. On the fifth day, as she was enduring another etiquette lesson from Vivian, there was a knock at the door. Isadora answered it and returned looking flustered. "The king requests your presence in the gardens," she said. "Now, if you are willing." Rosalind's heart kicked in her chest. She glanced down at the dress she wore, a simple but elegant thing in deep blue that Millicent had chosen for her that morning. "Is this appropriate?" "You look lovely," Vivian said, which was the first compliment the stern vampire had paid her. "Go. Do not keep His Majesty waiting." The gardens were not what Rosalind had expected. She had imagined something dark and gothic, full of night-blooming flowers and shadowy paths. Instead, she found herself in a vast underground conservatory, lit by soft, magical lights that mimicked twilight. Trees grew here, somehow. Their roots sunk into deep beds of earth, their branches reaching toward the enchanted ceiling that showed a permanent dusk sky. Flowers bloomed in riot of colors, and a stream ran through the center, fed by some hidden spring. Percival stood beside the stream, his back to her, his white hair loose and falling past his shoulders. He wore simpler clothes than she had seen him in before, dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, the informality made him more intimidating, not less. It suggested he was comfortable here. This was his domain. She approached slowly, her footsteps quiet on the moss-covered path. He turned before she reached him, as if he had sensed her presence, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. "You came," he said. "You requested. A request is not a command." He tilted his head slightly. "You could have refused." "Could I?" "Yes." He said it simply, as if it were obvious. "You are under my protection, but you are not my prisoner. If you do not wish to speak with me, you need only send word." She had not expected that, had not expected the careful courtesy in his tone, the way he kept his distance as if afraid of crowding her. It softened something in her chest, some defensive wall she had not realized she was holding up. "I wanted to come," she admitted. "I've been going mad in those rooms. I'm not used to being idle." "You have been learning. I've been sitting still while people talk at me. It's not the same." She moved closer to the stream, watching the way the water caught the light. "This place is beautiful. I didn't know anything like this could exist underground." "It was built 200 years ago by a vampire queen who missed the sun," Percival said quietly. He came to stand beside her, close but not touching. "She poured a fortune into the enchantments, the soil, the light. It was said she spent every day here until her death." "Did she die from missing the sun?" "In a manner of speaking. She walked into true sunlight one morning and burned to ash." His voice was matter of fact, but there was something beneath it, Sadness, perhaps. Vampires are not meant to long for what will destroy us. Rosalind looked at him. His profile was stark against the soft glow of the enchanted lights, his expression distant. Is that a warning? An observation. He turned to meet her eyes. You should know that the council has finalized the trials. They will be announced tomorrow night at a formal gathering of the court. You will be expected to attend. Her stomach tightened. What are they? 3 tests. The trial of blood, the trial of will, and the trial of loyalty. He paused. They are designed to be difficult for anyone, but especially for a human. The council hopes you will fail. And you? I hope you will succeed. He said it quietly, but with complete conviction. But I will not lie to you, Rosalind. These trials are dangerous. If you wish to leave, to take the offer of safe passage I made, I will uphold it. No one would fault you. You would. He blinked. What? You would fault me, she said. And I would fault myself. I've spent 5 years surviving, scraping by, barely living. You've given me a chance at something more, even if your reasons were complicated. I'm not walking away from that without trying. Something in his expression shifted. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the coolness that radiated from his skin, close enough to see the fine details of his face. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he had once been human and had smiled often. The precise angle of his jaw. The way his lips were pressed together, as if holding back words. You are braver than anyone I have met in a very long time, he said softly. Vampire or human. Her breath caught. I'm not brave. I'm desperate. They are often the same thing. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her hand where it rested on the stone wall beside the stream. His fingers were cool and gentle. I want you to know that my declaration was made in anger at my court. That is true, but it was not made in jest, and it was not made without thought. I have watched you, Rosalind Varden, for months. She stared at him. What? You stole from 3 supply trucks before you were caught. Each time, you took only what you needed to survive, and you shared what you could with others in the human quarter who were starving. You defended a child from vampire guards who were harassing him, even though it earned you a beating. You worked in a textile factory until it closed, and then in a kitchen until the owner died, and then anywhere you could until there was nowhere left. You never begged, you never broke, even when breaking would have been easier. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. You've been spying on me. I have been noticing you. His hand tightened slightly on hers. I am old, Rosalind. I have lived centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall, have known thousands of people, have forgotten most of them. It takes something extraordinary to catch my attention and hold it. You held it, your strength, your defiance, the way you refused to let this world crush you even when it tried. When you were brought before my court and they laughed, I saw a chance to do something I have wanted to do for a long time. What? Shake their complacency. Remind them that power is not the same as worth. He lifted his other hand and very gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. But I also saw a chance to bring you into my life in a way that would give you protection, resources, a future. I will not pretend it was entirely selfless. I wanted to know you. I still do. But I meant what I said. If you survive the trials, I will make you my queen, and I will give you all the honor and respect that title deserves. This is not a game to me. She could barely breathe. His hand was still in her hair. His eyes were on hers, and she felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. Again. Except this time, instead of falling, she felt like she was floating. I don't know how to be a queen, she whispered. You don't have to know now. You only have to be willing to learn. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. And to trust that I will stand beside you, not above you, beside you. It was too much, too fast. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity there, raw and unguarded in a way that must have cost him. He was a king. He was not supposed to show vulnerability, and yet here he was, offering it to her like a gift. "Okay," she said. "I trust you." She did not know if it was true yet, but she wanted it to be. That had to count for something. The gathering the next night was even more intimidating than her first appearance before the court. This time, she entered the throne room properly dressed in a gown of midnight blue that hugged her body and flowed around her legs like water. Her hair had been styled by Millicent into an elegant twist, with small crystals threaded through the dark strands that caught the light. She wore no jewelry except for a simple silver bracelet that Isadora had said was a mark of being under the king's protection. Percival was already on his throne when she entered, but he rose as she approached, a gesture of respect that sent a murmur through the assembled court. She walked down the center aisle with her head high, feeling hundreds of eyes on her, hearing whispers that probably were not meant to be kind. When she reached the base of the dais, he descended to meet her and offered his hand. She took it, his fingers closed around hers, cool and steady. "You look radiant," he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. "I look terrified," she murmured back. His lips quirked. "That too." He led her to a smaller throne that had been placed beside his own. It had not been there during her first visit. She realized with a jolt that it had been placed there for her. She was meant to sit beside him as his equal, not kneel below him as a supplicant. The symbolism was not lost on the court. She could see the stiffness in their postures, the way some of them looked outraged while others looked calculating. Once they were seated, Percival gestured to the Council of Elders, a group of 5 ancient vampires who stood to the right of the dais. The one in the center, a male vampire with white hair pulled back in a severe style and eyes like chips of ice, stepped forward. "I am Elder Theron," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "On behalf of the council, I will announce the consort trials that Rosalind Varden must complete to prove her worthiness to stand as queen." Rosalind felt Percival tense beside her, though his expression remained neutral. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to show no fear. "The trial of blood," Theron continued, "will test whether she can endure the bond that must exist between a vampire and his consort. She will offer her blood freely to the king 3 times over the course of 3 nights. If her body survives the feedings without breaking, she will pass." Feeding. Rosalind's stomach clenched. She had seen vampires feed before, had seen the humans who sold their blood to the immortals for money. They always looked drained afterward, pale and weak, and that was from carefully controlled feedings in clinical settings. This would be different. This would be Percival drinking from her, taking her blood into himself, creating a bond. She glanced at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the elder. He did not look at her. "The trial of will," Theron went on, "will test her mental fortitude. She will be placed in an enchanted chamber that manifests her deepest fears and greatest regrets. She must find her way out using only her own strength of mind. There is no time limit, but those who enter do not always emerge." Wonderful. A nightmare made real. Rosalind swallowed hard. "The trial of loyalty," the elder finished, his voice taking on a tone that sounded almost pleased, "will test whether she places the king and the crown above all else, including her own life. The specifics will be revealed when the time comes, but she should know that she may be asked to make a sacrifice that costs her everything." The hall was silent. Rosalind could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. 3 trials. Blood, will, and loyalty. Designed to break a human, just as Percival had warned. Designed to prove she was not worthy. She stood. The court inhaled collectively. Percival turned to her, surprise flickering across his face, but she did not look at him. She looked at Elder Theron and the council behind him. "I accept the trials," she said clearly. "When do we begin?" Theron's expression soured. He had probably expected her to falter, to show fear. "The trial of blood begins tomorrow at nightfall. Be ready." "I will be." She sat down, her heart racing, but her head high. Percival reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together in full view of the court. She squeezed back, grateful for the contact, for the reassurance. When the gathering finally ended, and they were walking back through the corridors toward her chambers, he spoke quietly. You did not have to stand. You did not have to accept so quickly. Would waiting have made it easier? No. He paused at the door to her rooms. Rosalind, the trial of blood. You should know that I will try to be gentle, but the bond requires that I take enough blood to weaken you. The council will have observers to ensure I do not hold back. It will hurt, and you will feel vulnerable. If you cannot bear it, tell me. I will stop. She looked up at him, at the concern written plainly on his face. If you stop, I fail. If I drain you too far, you die. His hand came up to cup her face. I would rather you fail than die. Then I'll make sure I don't die. She tried to smile. I'm stronger than I look. I know you are. He leaned down and very gently pressed his lips to her forehead. It was chaste and brief, but it sent warmth flooding through her. Rest tonight. Eat well. I will see you at sunset tomorrow. He left before she could respond, his white hair disappearing around a corner. Rosalind stood alone in the corridor for a long moment, her hand pressed to where he had kissed her forehead, her mind spinning. She was going to let a vampire drink her blood tomorrow. She was going to face her fears made manifest. She was going to be tested on loyalty in some way that might cost her everything. And she had just agreed to all of it because a vampire king with storm-gray eyes had told her he had been noticing her, that he thought she was extraordinary. She must be insane. But as she entered her chambers and closed the door behind her, she could not shake the feeling that this was the first time in her life she had chosen something instead of merely surviving what was forced upon her. That had to mean something. The next day passed in a haze of preparation. Isadora and Millicent fussed over her, making sure she ate 3 full meals and drank plenty of water. Cornelius visited to explain the history of the blood bond, how it would tie her to Percival in ways both physical and emotional, how it was considered the most intimate connection a vampire could share. Lucian brought her books on past consorts who had undergone trials, though none of them had faced exactly these 3 tests. Vivian gave her a sedative to help her rest, but Rosalind refused it. She wanted to be fully present for what was coming. As the sun set, someone delivered a white gown to her chambers. It was simple and elegant, falling to her feet in soft folds, the neckline low enough to bare her throat and collarbone. The message was clear. She dressed carefully, left her hair loose, and waited. Percival came for her himself. He wore black from head to toe, stark against his pale skin and white hair, and his expression was grave. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." He offered his arm, and she took it. Together, they walked through the palace to a private chamber deep in the interior. It was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive, with high ceilings and walls covered in tapestries depicting vampire history. A large bed dominated the center of the room, draped in red silk. Candles burned in sconces along the walls, casting flickering shadows. The 5 members of the council stood along one wall, observers as Percival had warned. Elder Theron inclined his head as they entered. "The trial of blood will now commence," he said formally. 3 feedings, 3 nights. The consort must survive with her mind and body intact. You may begin. Percival led Rosalind to the bed. She sat on the edge, her hands twisting in her lap. He knelt before her, bringing himself to her eye level, and took her hands in his. "Look at me," he said softly. "Only at me. Forget they are here. It is only us." She nodded, focusing on his face, on the concern in his eyes. "I will be as gentle as I can," he continued, "but you must tell me if it becomes too much. Pride is not worth your life." "I'll tell you," she promised. He stood and moved behind her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. She felt him gather her hair and lift it away from her neck, felt the cool brush of his breath against her skin. Her heart was hammering so hard she felt dizzy. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe." She tried. She felt his lips brush the side of her throat, felt his fangs, when had they descended, press against her skin, not breaking it yet, just resting there, a warning, a question. She tilted her head to the side, giving him access, giving him permission. The pain was sharp and bright when he bit down, like 2 needles of ice piercing her flesh. She gasped, her hands clutching at the silk bedding. But then the pain faded into something else, something warm and strange. She could feel him drinking, could feel the pull of her blood leaving her body. It should have been horrifying. Instead, it felt intimate, as if he were taking something precious from her, and she were giving it freely. She felt his arms come around her, steadying her as her head began to swim. His body was cool against her back, solid and strong. She leaned into him, trusting him to hold her up. Time seemed to slow. She lost track of how long they stayed like that, connected by blood and trust and something that felt larger than both. When he finally pulled away, she swayed. He caught her immediately, turning her to face him, and she saw that his lips were stained red. His eyes were brighter than before, almost glowing, and his expression was raw with something she could not name. "Enough," he said, and his voice was rougher than usual. "That is enough for tonight." Theron stepped forward, inspecting her clinically. Rosalind glared at him through the fog in her head. The elder nodded. "She survives. The first feeding is complete." Percival ignored him. He lifted Rosalind into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to the bed, laying her down on the silk. Someone had brought food, she realized dimly. Bread and meat and fruit and a glass of something dark red, not blood. Wine, maybe. "Eat," Percival said, sitting beside her. "You need to regain your strength." She ate because he asked her to, though her hands shook. He stayed with her the entire time, his hand resting on her shoulder, his presence a comfort. When she finally finished, she lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes. "Rosalind." His voice pulled her back from the edge of sleep. "You were extraordinary. Rest now. I will see you tomorrow night." She wanted to respond, to tell him that it had not been as terrible as she feared, that she could still feel him somehow, a thread connecting them that had not been there before. But sleep pulled her under before she could find the words. The second night was harder. Her body was still recovering from the first feeding, and when Percival bit her again, the dizziness came faster, the weakness more pronounced. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his arms, and heard him murmur reassurances against her skin. When he pulled away, she collapsed against him, barely conscious. "She cannot survive a third," someone said, one of the council members. "She will," Percival said coldly. "Give her time." He carried her to the bed again, fed her again, stayed with her until she fell asleep. She dreamed of blood and cold hands and storm-gray eyes watching her with something that looked like longing. The third night, she woke determined. Her body ached and her head felt light, but she dressed in the white gown and walked to the chamber beside Percival with her head high. The council was waiting. Theron looked almost disappointed that she had appeared. "The final feeding," he announced. "If she survives, the trial of blood is complete." Percival knelt before her again, but this time he pulled her into his arms first, holding her close. She felt his heartbeat, slow and steady, against her own rapid one. "You do not have to do this," he whispered into her hair. "You have proven enough." "Not yet," she whispered back. "One more. We can do one more." He drew back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something fierce and possessive and almost frightened. Then he kissed her, not on the forehead this time, on the mouth. It was gentle and brief, over almost before it began, but it left her breathless. "You are the strongest person I have ever known," he said, "human or vampire." Then he bit her for the third time. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Her body was too weak, her blood too depleted. She felt herself falling, felt darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision, but then she felt something else, a surge of strength that was not her own. Percival's strength, flowing into her through the bond they had created, keeping her anchored to consciousness. He was sharing his own power with her, giving her what she needed to survive. When he pulled away, she was still upright, still conscious, barely. The room spun and she heard Theron's voice from very far away, saying something about the trial being complete. Percival lifted her again, and this time he did not put her down. He carried her out of the chamber, through the corridors, back to her rooms. "Your Majesty, the council," Isadora began as they entered. "Can wait," Percival said flatly. "Leave us." The attendants fled. Percival laid Rosalind on her bed and sat beside her, his hand on her forehead. She could feel the bond between them now, strong and pulsing. She could feel his concern, his relief, his anger at the council for pushing her this far. "You cheated," she mumbled. "You gave me your strength. I ensured you survived. That was within the rules. They won't like it. I do not care what they like." His hand moved to cup her face. "Rosalind, you did it. You passed the first trial." She managed a weak smile. "Only 2 more to go. Rest first. The trial of will is not for another week. You have time to recover." She wanted to stay awake, to talk to him, to explore this new connection that hummed between them. But her body had other ideas. She fell asleep with his hand still on her face and his presence in her mind like a second heartbeat. The week between trials passed in a strange mixture of recovery and anticipation. Rosalind grew stronger each day, the bond with Percival seeming to accelerate her healing. He visited her daily, sometimes just sitting with her in silence, sometimes talking about court politics or history, or nothing at all. She found herself looking forward to those visits, to the way his presence made her feel safe and seen. The bond itself was a revelation. She could feel him now, a constant awareness at the back of her mind. His emotions were not open to her exactly, but she could sense shifts in his mood, could tell when he was troubled or pleased or thinking of her. It was intimate and strange and wonderful. On the 5th day, he took her back to the gardens. They walked beside the stream, and he told her stories of his human life, centuries ago in a small village that no longer existed. She told him about her parents, about the years before the plague, about the things she had done to survive. "I stole from you," she said at one point. "From your supply trucks. Doesn't that bother you?" "No." He said it simply. "You were starving. The system I created to distribute blood rations failed you. If anything, I should apologize for that." "You're not like what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone crueler, colder." She glanced at him. "You're a vampire king. You've lived for centuries. You've killed people. And yet you're gentle with me." "I am gentle with you because you are precious to me." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I know what I am, Rosalind. I know what I have done. I do not pretend to be a good man, but I can choose who I am with you. And I choose to be someone worthy of your trust." She reached out and took his hand. "You are. Worthy, I mean." He looked down at their joined hands, then raised hers to his lips and kissed her knuckles. It was an old-fashioned gesture, courtly and romantic. It made her heart flutter. "The trial of will begins tomorrow," he said quietly. "I cannot help you with this one. You will face it alone." "I know. Whatever you see in that chamber, remember that it is not real. It is designed to break you, but it cannot unless you let it. I won't let it. I believe you." He squeezed her hand. "But I need you to know that if you do not emerge, I will come for you. I will tear down that chamber stone by stone. Nothing will keep me from you." The fierceness in his voice made her shiver. "I'll come out," she promised. "I'm not leaving you." The trial of will began at midnight. Rosalind was led to a chamber deep beneath the palace, so far down that she lost count of the stairs. The room itself was circular and empty except for a door on the opposite side. The walls were covered in runes that glowed with a faint blue light. Elder Theron stood at the entrance, looking smug. "You will enter. The door will seal behind you. The enchantments will activate. You must reach the opposite door to exit. Simple. And if I can't? Then you remain inside until madness takes you, or until the king breaks the enchantments and admits your failure." Theron smiled coldly. "Previous subjects have lasted anywhere from a few hours to several days. We shall see how long you endure." Rosalind looked at Percival, who stood beside the elder with his jaw clenched. "I'll see you soon," she said. "You will," he agreed. She walked into the chamber. The door sealed behind her with a sound like a tomb closing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the runes flared bright and the world dissolved. She was standing in the human quarter, in the alley behind the factory where she used to work. It was night, and she could hear screaming. She ran toward the sound and found herself in front of her old apartment building, the one where she had lived with her parents before they died. The building was on fire. No, this was not real. This had not happened. Her parents had died of plague, not fire. But the heat was real on her face, the smoke was real in her lungs, and she could hear voices screaming for help from inside. Her parents' voices. She lunged for the door, but hands grabbed her from behind. She thrashed, fighting to get free, but the hands were too strong. She looked back and saw Percival holding her, his face expressionless. "Let them die," he said. "They are only human. They do not matter." She knew it was not real. She knew it was the trial. But hearing those words in his voice, feeling him hold her back while her parents burned, was agony. She screamed and fought and clawed, but he did not let go. The building collapsed. The screaming stopped. She went limp in his arms, sobbing. "This is what it means to be queen," the false Percival whispered in her ear. "You will watch humans die, and you will do nothing, because you are one of us now. You have left them behind." "No," she gasped. "No, I haven't." "Haven't you? You drink the king's blood through the bond. You live in luxury while they starve. You have abandoned them. I haven't. I won't." The scene shifted. She was in the throne room now, dressed in a queen's regalia, seated beside Percival on the throne. The court was assembled before them, and at the base of the dais, a group of humans were chained and kneeling. "They have committed crimes against the crown," Percival said beside her. "You must pass judgment." She looked at the humans, recognized them. They were people from her old neighborhood. People she had shared food with, worked beside, tried to help. Now they were here because of her, because she had become queen. "Please," one of them sobbed, a woman named Clara, who had once given Rosalind her coat during a brutal winter. "Please, we only stole food. Our children were starving." "The law is clear," Percival said. "Theft from vampire stores is punishable by death. As queen, you must uphold the law. Execute them." Rosalind looked at him, at the cold, merciless expression on his face. This was not her Percival. Her Percival had offered her escape, had valued her strength, had shared his power to save her life. This was a nightmare. A test. "No," she said clearly. "I will not." "Then you fail as queen." The court began to laugh, the same mocking laughter she had heard on the first day. It rose and rose until it was deafening. The humans at the base of the dais began to scream as guards moved forward with swords. Clara reached out to her, pleading. Rosalind stood. "This is not real," she said loudly. "None of this is real." The scene flickered. For a moment, she saw the circular chamber again, the glowing runes. Then it solidified into a new nightmare. She was alone in darkness. Utterly alone. She called out, but no one answered. She walked for what felt like hours, but there was nothing. No light, no sound, no presence in her mind. The bond with Percival was gone. This was her deepest fear, she realized. Not death, not pain, isolation. Being forgotten, being nothing to no one. She sank to her knees in the darkness. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I don't want to be alone." Silence. Then, so faint she almost missed it, a whisper in her mind. Not words, just a presence. Percival. The bond was still there, distant, muffled by the enchantments, but there. He was still with her. She closed her eyes and focused on that thread of connection. Followed it like a lifeline through the dark. The trial was designed to break her by making her believe she was alone. But she was not alone. She had never been alone, not since the moment Percival declared her his queen and bound himself to her protection. The darkness began to lift. She opened her eyes and saw the opposite door, the one she was meant to reach. It was only a few feet away. She stood on shaking legs and walked toward it. When she touched the handle, the enchantments shattered. The door opened onto the corridor where Percival was waiting. He caught her as her knees buckled, lifting her into his arms. "I knew you would make it," he said, and his voice was raw with relief. "How long was I in there?" 6 hours. He pressed his face against her hair. The longest 6 hours of my life. Theron looked disappointed again. She has passed the trial of will. Rosalind laughed weakly. Is that all you can say? I passed? 2 trials complete, the elder said stiffly. The trial of loyalty will take place in 3 days. Rest while you can. Percival carried her away without another word. She clung to him, feeling the solidness of his body, the cool reassurance of his presence. Real. He was real. This was real. What did you see? He asked quietly as they walked. My parents dying while you held me back and told me humans did not matter, sentencing my friends to death, being alone forever. She shuddered. It felt real. I would never do those things, he said fiercely. Never. You know that, don't you? I do now. The trial tested whether I believed it, whether I could remember who you really are even when confronted with a nightmare version. She pulled back to look at him. I felt you. Through the bond. That's how I found the door. His eyes widened. I was trying to reach you. I thought the enchantments were too strong. They almost were, but not quite. She smiled. We're connected, really connected. Yes, he said softly. We are. He took her to his own chambers that night, not hers. She was too shaken to sleep alone, and he did not leave her side. They lay together on his massive bed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. She listened to his heartbeat, slow and steady, and felt the bond between them pulse in time with it. One more trial, she murmured. One more. His hand stroked her hair. Loyalty. They will ask you to choose between me and something else, something they think you will value more. There's nothing I value more than you. She felt him go still. Rosalind, I mean it. She lifted her head to look at him. 3 weeks ago, I was alone and starving and waiting to die. You gave me hope. You gave me purpose. You've been kind and honest and protective. You've never lied to me, never used me. You see me as a person, not a tool. Why wouldn't I choose you? Because I am a vampire. Because I have done terrible things. Because choosing me means leaving your humanity behind in some ways. Or it means bringing my humanity into your world and changing it. She touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. You said you want me beside you, not below you. Let me stand beside you and help you make this kingdom better for humans and vampires alike. Let me be your queen, not just in name, but in truth. He stared at her for a long moment, then he kissed her, deep and fierce and claiming. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were glowing. You are already my queen, he said roughly, trial or no trial. You are mine, and I am yours. Then let's finish this, she said, together. The 3 days before the final trial passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Rosalind spent time with her tutors, learning everything she could about vampire law and history. She met with Percival's advisors, slowly earning their respect or at least their acknowledgement. She even attended a court function, standing beside Percival as he heard petitions and made judgments. The courtiers watched her with wary eyes, but no one openly challenged her anymore. The bond between her and Percival deepened. She could feel his emotions more clearly now, could sense when he was pleased or troubled. He, in turn, seemed attuned to her needs, appearing whenever she was overwhelmed or anxious. They stole moments alone in the gardens or his chambers, talking and kissing and learning each other. She was falling in love with him. She knew it was fast, knew it was probably unwise, but she could not help it. He was everything she had never dared to hope for. Strong and protective but not controlling, powerful but not cruel, ancient but not jaded. He made her feel seen and valued and cherished, and she was fairly certain he was falling in love with her too. On the night of the final trial, she dressed in a gown of deep red, the color of blood and royalty. Her hair was loose and her throat bore the faint scars of Percival's feedings, marks she wore with pride. When she entered the throne room, the entire court was assembled. This was not going to be a private trial. This was a spectacle. Elder Theron stood at the center of the room, flanked by the other council members. Percival was on his throne, his expression carefully neutral, but she could feel his tension through the bond. "The trial of loyalty," Theron announced, "will now commence. Rosalind Varden, approach." She walked forward until she stood before the dais. The elder gestured, and guards brought forward a human man. He was middle-aged, thin, with kind eyes. He looked terrified. "This man is Marcus Wren," Theron said. "A human from your old neighborhood. He has been arrested for organizing resistance against vampire rule. The sentence for treason is death. However, as your final trial, you are given a choice. You may grant him mercy and spare his life, defying the king's law and proving where your true loyalties lie. Or you may confirm his execution, demonstrating your loyalty to the crown above all else, including your own people." Rosalind's blood ran cold. This was the test. Choose Marcus and prove she still valued humans over vampires, over Percival. Or choose the crown and prove she had abandoned her people for power. It was a trap. Either choice would make her look bad. Either choice would hurt. She looked at Marcus. He was shaking but met her eyes steadily. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Do what you must." Then she looked at Percival. His face was a mask, but through the bond she felt his fury. Not at her, at the council, at the impossible choice they were forcing on her. She took a breath and turned back to Theron. "I refuse both options," the court murmured. Theron's eyes narrowed. "That is not how the trial works." "Then the trial is flawed." She stepped forward, addressing the entire court. "You want me to choose between my people and my king as if they are opposing forces, but they are not. A true queen serves both. A true queen finds solutions that do not require sacrificing one for the other. Marcus Wren organized resistance because humans are suffering under vampire rule. That suffering is real. Ignoring it does not make it go away. It makes it fester." She turned to Percival. "You are a just king. You have told me you value strength and honesty. So I am being honest. The law that sentences Marcus to death is wrong. Not because treason should be unpunished, but because resistance born of desperation is not true treason. It is a cry for help. If I am to be queen, I will not uphold laws that are unjust. I will work to change them. And I will start now." She turned back to the council. "I choose loyalty to the crown, but I define the crown as more than just the king. It is the kingdom. All of it. Vampire and human alike. If that makes me unworthy, then so be it. Execute me alongside Marcus, and find a queen who is willing to rule with cruelty instead of compassion." The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Percival stood. He descended the dais and came to stand beside her. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall. "Rosalind Varden has passed the trial of loyalty," he said. "Not by choosing the easy path, but by demonstrating the courage to forge a new one. She is right. The law that condemns Marcus Wren is flawed. I will review it and others like it. And I will do so with my queen at my side, because she has proven herself wiser and braver than any consort before her." He took her hand and raised it high. "I declare the trials complete. Rosalind Varden will be my queen, and any who challenge this challenge me." The court dropped to their knees. Even Theron, though he looked furious, bowed his head. Marcus Wren stared at her with tears streaming down his face. Percival pulled her close and kissed her in front of everyone, claiming her publicly and unmistakably. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with pride and something deeper, something that looked very much like love. "You are extraordinary," he murmured. "I learned from the best," she murmured back. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Rosalind's coronation was planned, a grand event that would unite the court and announce to the world that the vampire king had chosen a human queen. But before that could happen, she had to make a choice of her own. Percival had explained it to her carefully. If she remained human, she would age and die while he stayed immortal. Their time together would be limited to a few decades at most. But if she chose to turn, to become a vampire, they would have eternity. "I will not pressure you," he had said, holding her close in his chambers. "The choice is yours alone. I will love you whether you are human or vampire. But you should know that turning is painful, and there is no going back." She had thought about it for days, had weighed the cost of immortality against the cost of staying human. In the end, the choice was simple. She wanted to be with him, not for decades, for as long as they could have. "I want to turn," she told him one night. "I want forever with you." His relief had been palpable. "You are certain?" "Completely." He had kissed her deeply. "Then I will make you mine in every way." The turning happened the night before her coronation. It was a private affair, just the two of them in his chambers. He explained the process, how he would drain her to the edge of death and then feed her his blood, how her body would die and be reborn, how it would hurt more than anything she had ever experienced. "I trust you," she said simply. He laid her on the bed and climbed over her, his eyes filled with love and regret. "I am sorry for the pain this will cause. I forgive you." He bit her throat and drank deeply, more deeply than he ever had before. She felt her life draining away, felt the world growing dim. When she was on the very edge of consciousness, he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded. She drank. His blood was cold and strange and powerful. It burned as it went down her throat, burned through her veins like fire. Then the pain began. It was agony. Her body convulsed, her bones breaking and reforming, her organs shutting down and restarting. She screamed until her voice gave out. Percival held her through all of it, whispering reassurances, stroking her hair, never leaving her side. When it was finally over, she lay gasping on the bed, her body changed and new. She opened her eyes, and the world was different, sharper, clearer. She could hear Percival's heartbeat, could smell the blood in his veins, could see in perfect detail despite the dim light. She was a vampire. She sat up slowly and looked at her hands. They were paler now, the same luminous white as Percival's. She touched her hair and found it had lightened, the dark brown now streaked with silver. "How do you feel?" Percival asked softly. "Strong," she said. "Powerful. Hungry." He smiled and offered his wrist again. "Feed. You need to complete the transformation." She bit him and drank, and the taste of his blood was ambrosia. She felt their bond solidify, felt the connection between them become unbreakable. When she pulled away, she was smiling. "I can feel you," she said. "Completely. You're in my head and my heart and everywhere, as you are in mine." He pulled her into his arms. "My queen, my love, my everything." They made love that night for the first time, and it was fierce and passionate and perfect. Afterward, she lay in his arms and marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Becoming like me?" "Never." She kissed his chest. "You gave me a future. You gave me purpose. You gave me love. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." The coronation was magnificent. The throne room was decorated in red and gold, filled with vampires and a contingent of humans who had been invited as a gesture of unity. Rosalind wore a gown of white and silver, her hair styled in an intricate crown of braids, her throat adorned with diamonds. She walked down the aisle alone, her head high, and when she reached the dais, Percival was waiting. He took her hand and led her to the smaller throne beside his. Elder Theron, looking resigned but respectful, placed a circlet of silver and sapphires on her head. "I present to you Queen Rosalind," Percival said, his voice ringing with pride. "My partner, my equal, my love." The court knelt. The humans in attendance applauded, and Rosalind looked out at the assembled crowd and felt for the first time in her life that she belonged. In the months that followed, she proved herself as queen. She worked with Percival to reform laws that oppressed humans, to create better systems for distributing resources, to build bridges between the two populations. It was hard work, and not everyone was happy with the changes. But slowly, things began to improve. She also proved herself in court politics, using the intelligence and resilience she had developed during her years of survival to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries. Some vampires came to respect her. Others remained hostile. But no one could deny that she had earned her place. And through it all, Percival was at her side. They ruled together, loved each other deeply, and built a kingdom that was stronger for their partnership. One night, a year after her coronation, they returned to the gardens where he had first told her he meant his declaration. They stood beside the stream, hand in hand, and looked up at the enchanted sky. "Do you remember when I said I had been noticing you?" Percival asked. "I remember. I never told you why." He turned to face her. "It was because you reminded me of myself. When I was human, I was an outcast too. I had nothing and no one. And when I was turned, I was given power but no purpose. I spent centuries feeling empty, until I saw you. You were so strong, so determined to survive and help others despite having nothing. I wanted that strength in my life. I wanted you." She touched his face. "You have me. Forever." "Forever," he agreed, and kissed her. In the distance, the court carried on without them, politics and power games and endless machinations. But here, in this quiet garden, the vampire king and his outcast queen were simply two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build a life together. It was not a fairy tale. They still faced challenges, still argued, still struggled with the weight of ruling a fractured kingdom. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Years passed. The kingdom changed, becoming more balanced, more just. Humans and vampires learned to coexist with less hostility. Rosalind's name became synonymous with compassion and strength, and Percival's reputation shifted from feared tyrant to respected king. On the 10th anniversary of her coronation, they stood once again before the court. This time, it was to announce a new initiative, a council that would include both vampire and human representatives, giving the human population a voice in their own governance. The court grumbled, but did not openly object. They had learned that their king and queen were united in purpose, and challenging one meant challenging both. After the announcement, as they retired to their private chambers, Rosalind laughed softly. "What amuses you?" Percival asked, pulling her close. "I was just thinking about that first night, when you told your laughing court that I would be your queen. Do you remember how they looked?" "I remember." His arms tightened around her. "I remember thinking that I had just gambled everything on a human girl I barely knew, that I might be making the greatest mistake of my long life. And now? Now I know it was the best decision I ever made." He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her lips. "You are my greatest triumph, Rosalind. Not because I made you queen, but because you chose to stay, to trust me, to love me despite everything." "You made it easy," she said softly. "You saw me when everyone else looked through me. You gave me value when I thought I had none. How could I not love you?" They stood together in the center of their chambers, holding each other, two souls bound by blood and choice and love. Outside, the kingdom they ruled stretched vast and complex. But inside, in this moment, they were simply themselves. Partners, equals, lovers. The outcast had become queen. The laughter had stopped long ago, and in its place was something far more powerful. A love that had survived trials and transformation, that had united two worlds that would last for eternity. As Percival lifted Rosalind into his arms and carried her to their bed, as she laughed and kissed him and felt the bond between them sing with happiness, she thought about the girl she had been, starving, desperate, alone. That girl would never have believed this future was possible, but it was. It was real and beautiful, and hers. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "And I love you," he whispered back. "My queen, my Rosalind. Forever, forever." It was a promise they would keep, through centuries to come, through whatever challenges the future held. They had found each other in the darkness, had chosen each other despite impossible odds, and had built something extraordinary together. The Vampire King and his outcast queen, bound by blood, united by love, ruling together in a kingdom they were slowly transforming into something better. It was not perfect, but it was theirs. And that was more than enough.